Attorney Black. I'm so excited to be able to speak with you today and get to know a little bit more about what you are offering for the center. Are you excited about this new venture? How are you feeling?
I am. And so it's so nice to meet you too, Aiyana. And I am really excited about it. I think this is a great opportunity for Virginia State University. I think it's a great opportunity for minority entrepreneurs, and I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm honored to have been asked to participate, and I am excited about the venture.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we get started, I do understand that what you're providing right now is more so for educational purposes and not necessarily legal counsel. So I understand that you have to put sort of a disclaimer before we get started. So if you would please do that, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Yeah. Always you want to be careful when you're talking with entrepreneurs and people who are interested in legal services that if you are not actually representing them, you're not providing them with legal advice. But you can provide educational information. So general information about the law and guidance and information, but not providing any particular legal advice for someone's situation. So if there is something that they're looking at doing and wanting to pursue, where it would involve getting legal counsel, they should reach out to a private practitioner individually and talk about their particular matter, their particular facts, because the facts and the situation always will inform the type of legal advice that is given. And so in this case, this is just really a generic conversation, for educational purposes, and not substituting for private legal advice to anyone who's viewing this.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So how long have you been practicing, and what type of law services in terms of the workshop can viewers and participants, expect from the workshop?
So I have been practicing for 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so 3 decades. It sounds like a long time. It's been a wonderful journey, but I started as a trademark examining attorney in the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
Okay.
And it was a great foundation for me because they do an excellent job training their incoming attorneys on trade or all facets of trademark law and in the prosecution of trademark applications before the United States. So I started there and did half of my legal career there. So I spent some time with them, not just examining, but also in policy and procedure and changes in the law. And it was a fascinating career and I loved it. And then I went into private practice. I had my own practice for a while, and then I merged with a medium-sized firm and helped to grow their intellectual property practice group. And then I went in-house. So I served as general counsel for a private global company for a number of years, and so now I do some work on the side in terms of doing some representation, but my main focus really is in teaching. So I'm in academia right now. So that's been my journey. But I started with trademarks, and in every position that I've held, I've done trademark law. So I would say that's a big focus for me, but I've also done all of intellectual property with the exception of filing patent applications, because you have to have a specialized bar license for patent applications and prosecution work. So I don't do any of that, but I've worked with copyrights, I've worked with patent counseling in my in-house position, trade secrets, all facets of intellectual property. But also when I was in-house, I did employment law, privacy data security, regulatory compliance. So I had a broad brush of some other areas of law, but my main focus over these 30 years has been intellectual property.
Awesome, awesome. So for someone who might be really new to the legality side of business, what exactly is intellectual property on a very simple baseline level?
So intellectual property on a basic level is a different type of property. People are familiar with real property, real estate, personal property. Intellectual property is intangible. So it's property rights that are granted to creative intellectual discoveries, the ideas of an invention, the written publications and musical creativity and works. While those things you can see and you can even look at, you can hear, but the rights that are granted to them are what's intellectual property. The branding that you use to identify products and services is intellectual property. The ideas or competitive edges that you might have in a business that you don't want anyone else to know can be protected as trade secrets. And the rights that are given and how that works are all facets of intellectual property, which we will get into in the workshop.
Absolutely, guys. So stay tuned for the workshop. And in that aspect, then, why is it important to protect your intellectual property, especially for let's say, a startup business or someone who's looking to grow and expand their company? They might have so many dollars and cents to budget out. So why would it be important to actually protect your intellectual property and sort of prioritize those aspects of the business?
So that is a good question. And it's a question that every entrepreneur should ask before they start their business. And I enjoy watching Shark Tank. I've had clients that have been on Shark Tank, and I find it a very fascinating show. I'm not crazy about everything about it, but I think it's a very good learning opportunity for entrepreneurs. And if you've ever watched Shark Tank, you know they are always asking about, especially Lori Greene, do you have a patent on this? And Damon John is always asking about branding, register, branding, licensing rights. And so for people who are investing in businesses, they want to know what your proprietary rights are, your assets. What do you have to separate you from someone else coming in and doing what you're doing and stealing your ideas or competing against you? What's your proprietary interest, your proprietary rights? That's where intellectual property falls. And so it's important to know what that is and to protect it so that someone else can't come in and do that. And so with that, I would say that that's one of the reasons that it's very important to evaluate that at the beginning, because it's valuable commodities that you can then use in exchange for potentially giving equity for investments in your startup. So again, it's a property right that you can use.
Absolutely. So how hard or easy is it to actually get those patents and get the trademarks? Is it as simple? Because for a lot of people, I think that especially in the minority communities, we have a misconception about legal proceedings in general and thinking it might not be worth the time and effort. I can just do that later. I can just cross that bridge when I get to it later because I'm not at this next point. So is it a hard thing to get these legal aspects done and accounted for, or is it something that if you just get it done, you don't have to worry about it afterwards?
So that's a really good question that we'll get into in the workshop, because it varies depending on the type of intellectual property that you're looking to acquire. What you have in terms of where it falls into, what kind of protection you can get for it. And there are sometimes you can overlap. You can get protection, copyright protection and patent protection for certain things, trademark protection and copyright protection for certain things. When is it important to have a trade secret and why? And that's really important in terms of starting out. But the nuances of that we'll get into the workshop, because it's layered. And it varies. And we'll use case studies to kind of talk about examples so that people understand that. But it is important. And I will point out that I've had prospective clients come to me before wanting to protect something after they've already disclosed it without pursuing any patent protection. And someone else has already used that invention or that idea, created it, and they have no rights associated with it because they did not protect their interests at the beginning stages. And it's really painful to have to tell a client or a prospective client that they've basically given away their rights before they even got started. And a lot of that is because they were not informed. So it is important, and we'll get into that and why it's important. And they're valuable business assets that you want to protect and that you want to have.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in terms of the workshop, can you give us a high level little sneak peek or somewhat of what the topics we'll be covering? Because in the workshop, of course, we'll get more into the weeds, but just wanted everyone that's watching to have somewhat of an understanding of what legal proceedings are and why they are relevant, so that in going to the workshop, they'll have some sort of prior knowledge and understanding. So I do appreciate you for answering those questions prior to. Now, in terms of what we can expect in the workshop on a high level basis, can you tell us what we'll get when we actually attend the workshops?
So I will do that, but Aiyana, if you don't mind, I'd like to step back for one thing that I'd like to really point out, because you kind of asked me, and I don't know if I've really addressed it directly, of the importance of intellectual property to entrepreneurs. And it's important because it's property ownership and it's business assets that you can use to help fund you and start up your business. And it's exclusive rights that you have against others that might want to compete against you. But for minority entrepreneurs, it's even more important, because one of the reasons that there's economic disadvantages in the minority community is because of the lack of property ownership. And I'm talking about real property ownership. And a lot of that stems from, things that have happened in this country, as well as the systemic, discrimination in acquiring property rights and property ownership for minority communities. Having intellectual property as a business owner is having property ownership. And while it's not real property, it's property that you can then use and use it's some of the same rights and advantages that you have of owning real property, like licensing or leasing it, like using it as collateral for loans, like leaving it to your heirs, selling it, those things that you have for real property, gaining royalty or, passive income. Those are all valuable reasons to have property. And while property ownership of real property has been very challenging for minorities, I think property ownership and intellectual property for minorities is more because of the lack of knowledge of that as an opportunity for economic empowerment. So that's why I think this is so important for us to have and to understand and then to monetize.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. And I thank you for also adding that piece in, because we are at the program really focused, obviously, on entrepreneurship and minority small businesses. So I do appreciate you for highlighting and emphasizing the importance and also putting it into that perspective, because there are a lot of things that I've just noticed in growing up and in school and at work and in general is just, it's a lack of knowledge, not necessarily a lack of skill base. And it's I guess put out there as it's a skill lack. It's so you guys just don't know how to do it, or lazy, or this, that, and the third. But really, it's coming from that knowledge base and not having access to resources like yourself. So thank you for that as well. So with that, can you tell us a little sneak peek of what the topics? We don't have to get too in depth, because that's what the purpose of the workshop is. If you guys want to hear a whole bunch about the workshop, attend it. And in the meantime, can you tell us a little bit about what we can expect, what you'll be talking about, and any questions, anything like that would be great.
So, when you talked about the knowledge and having that education, two things come to mind. One is I grew up in New York, right? And so there was a clothing design outlet that existed called Sims. This predated like Marshalls and Steinmark and things, but their tagline, which is a trademark, haha, is an educated consumer is our best customer. Mm. And I love that tagline because it is about the education. When you have an educated client, it's easier to help them because they're informed. One of the reasons that I love to teach legal studies and to non-lawyers, in the undergraduate level, is because exposure helps them to start to identify and see these are legal issues that maybe I don't know all the nuances, but it triggers that there's something there that I need to look into or ask about. And so with that in mind, this workshop is designed for non-lawyers, right? Business professionals, entrepreneurs who are looking at all facets of operating a business, this being one of them, this being an important one, which sometimes, like you said, gets glossed over. So people talk about trademark, I'm going to copyright my trademark and I'm going to, do all these things. But what are the differences between a patent and a copyright and a trademark? And trade secrets are actually intellectual property? Yes, they are. They are important intellectual property because if you share a secret, it's not a secret. But under the law, there's a way to share a secret and keep it a secret. So how do you do that? We're going to cover that in the workshop. How long, if I get a patent, it costs so much money. Why does it cost so much money? Why is it so important? How do I get it? And I need somebody to help me. So I have to share this information. There's time restrictions that you need to be aware of. There's costs that you need to understand. There's terms on how long a patent can last. And there's rights that you need to understand that you have that are different than the rights you can have when you have a trademark or you have a copyright. So there's so many nuances of these areas of intellectual property that I think understanding that on a foundational level helps people to say, oh my gosh, I got this idea. I can't tell you about it until you do X, Y, and Z, right? And so those things will cover. And then if you get protection, what do you do with it? Like, how do I use it? Why do I want it? To your point, this is, a certificate. What can I do with a certificate? There's a lot you can do with a certificate because that certificate that's issued by the United States gives you certain federal rights that if someone else tries to violate your federal rights, you can take action. And you can be awarded damages and remedies for those violations. You need to know what your rights are. It's not just a piece of paper. There's a lot of value behind those pieces of paper. And so we're going to cover a lot of that. And because this is law heavy in terms of the legal concepts and the definitions and things like that, what I have found in the best way of helping non-lawyers to understand it is through case studies. So business case studies, business scenarios, things that you can relate to that you're familiar with. Where do the laws tie into that in intellectual property? Oh, I didn't realize. So that's what a copyright is, because now it makes sense because you know it in a context that's familiar to you. So we cover a lot of that in the workshop. How to monetize it, thinking about that, how do I make money? Like, I'm going to invest all this money. Well, how do I make money from getting these rights? And then how do I know how to enforce it? If somebody is using it, how do I find that out? So there's a lot of little things that we'll cover. And it's a heavy topic. We're going to cover it enough for people, like I said, to be able to identify legal issues, to be able to know when to hire a lawyer, right? Because you still may need to hire a lawyer, but at least when you go in, you're going to be that educated client. So those are some of the things that we'll do in the workshop. We'll have fun and we'll learn a lot, and they will be informed entrepreneurs, hopefully at the end of the workshop.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one main point that you pointed out that I really want to expand upon is because legalities and the different terms and things can seem extremely overwhelming for someone who's not a lawyer and has little to no prior knowledge of the law, really. So I think it's super exciting that you're operating it from the stance of having case studies, because everyone understands examples, for the most part anyway. Most people understand examples and can relate to those case studies. So this is definitely a workshop that I feel will be incredibly useful and also will be digestible for people to actually understand and be able to utilize whatever we're learning and actually be able to implement it. Because it's one thing to have the information, it's another thing to actually know what to do with it. So outside of the basic implementations and different things like that, what do you think would be the main benefit from attending this workshop? I understand we're a little bit out on time. Do you have a hard stop, or do you have an extra couple of minutes?
I have a couple extra minutes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. This will be my last question then. So, and this actually was the last question, so perfect timing. So what actually do you feel entrepreneurs or anyone participating in the program can actually benefit from? And we see, of course, the aspect of implementation, but what about this specific workshop with the center in the small kind of setting that we're going to be hosting it in? How do you feel that will be beneficial for minority entrepreneurs in the long run and short term?
Well, I think, and I love your term digestible, because I think it will be digestible. But one of the things that you brought up about the importance of this workshop is that I want to spare the pain for entrepreneurs of learning things hindsight. Mm-hmm. Because once you let that intellectual property fall into the public domain, you can't get it back. So if you don't even know what you have that's intellectual property, how can you protect it? And if you don't protect it, how can you gain that property ownership and economic empowerment that we're talking about? And so I think I'm a preventive, proactive person. And I think some of my training at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office as a public servant of helping to educate people has informed that, of wanting people to understand or know what they don't even know that they don't know. Opening up their eyes to see, when I'm checking off getting my business license, getting my entity designation, getting my loan, I need to be checking off my intellectual property. What am I doing with that? Where does that fall in? What do I have that I'm setting up that falls in the category of intellectual property? And then how do I go ahead and protect that at the very early stages, so that when I am looking for loans or need collateral for that, or an investor wants to know what's proprietary about mine, that they want to invest their own dollars, I have something to offer, that I have some ownership in this, and that this is an asset that's valuable to me and makes my business appealing to potential business partners. And so I think that's the takeaway of adding that element to the planning of the business at the beginning stages, so that you don't lose out when the time comes that you realize that you need this and it's too late. Someone else is trading off of it. Someone else is using that idea. And so it's protecting it when it's a seed before it bursts and grows. And so that every growth, every advancement of it, you get to participate in, and you get to receive the fruit of that labor and that idea, that creative intellectual ideas that you've come up with for your business. So I think that's the big takeaway for this workshop, and that it's very timely to do at the launch of your business.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Attorney Black, we know that you are a busy attorney and you have lots and lots of things to do. So we are so thankful that you were able to chat with us. Also thankful that you're able to do this workshop for the program. And I just, like I said, just want to say thank you. We learned a lot, even in this short time period, even though this is just for educational purposes, guys. But thank you for your knowledge. And we look forward to this workshop as well. So if you have anything else that you wanted to discuss or just a little bit of commentary to end off, I will give you that option as well. And if not, it was such a pleasure to have you on.
I think we've had a great conversation, and I think everything else that I need to say I will share in the workshop.
Absolutely. So stay tuned, guys.